I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 16, so let's focus on verses 6 through 8. Abram replied to Sarai, "Here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her." And then Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" Genesis chapter 16, verses 6 through 8. Now, throughout my church experience, whenever Hagar has been mentioned, she's often vilified with the overtones of being the mother of radical Islam, because after all, she was the one who birthed Ishmael. And that may be undeserved criticism toward one whom the Lord blessed. Interestingly, God never pronounced Abram's intimacy with Hagar as a sin. Not saying that it wasn't, just saying the Lord never pronounced it as such. What is clear is that Abram's intimacy was a symbol of his intimacy with Egypt. Hagar was an Egyptian slave whom Sarai had obtained while in Egypt. And we remember what was happening in Egypt. It's important to remember that Abram profited from his sin in Egypt. And what was his sin? Well, he lied. He said that Sarai is my sister, not that she was his wife. So all the while, Sarai suffered the personal burden of keeping Abram's lie a secret. And then she had to fight off the advances of a Pharaoh. Can you imagine? In a similar way, Abram profited from his relations with Hagar at the emotional risk of Sarai. So old Abe had his issues with passivity. Instead of taking God's promises and his direction at face value, Abram injected human reason in order to accomplish God's purposes. That's never a good idea. Perhaps he was the father of our faith in more ways than one. And on both of those occasions, Sarai was left to fend for herself. Sarai's reaction to Hagar's pregnancy, remember, which led to Hagar's change of attitude toward Sarai. Well, her reaction to Hagar's pregnancy within the context of Sarai's marriage relationship with Abram, well, that was an explosion of pent-up emotion against Abram's neglect of her in Egypt. It's not to say that Sarai was justified in abusing Hagar. I simply want to paint an accurate emotional portrait of Abram and Sarai's marriage. So, what of God's response to Hagar and to her unborn son? Today's passage mentions the angel of the Lord visited Hagar on her way back to Egypt. Shur was the boundary wall that protected Egypt from raiding nomads. Well, the narrative illustrates beautifully the Lord's regard for the saddened and the abandoned soul. It is the first time angel is found in the Bible. And of course, the phrase angel of the Lord, whenever it's capitalized in your Bible, denotes more than simply one of the Lord's angels. The angel of the Lord is believed by most theologians to be the Messiah himself. You say the Messiah, he wasn't born as a baby in a manger yet. Well, we have to remember from Micah chapter 5, verse 2, that the Messiah has existed even from eternity past. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from eternity. You see, the Messiah also exists, not just in eternity past, but for eternity future. As part of the Trinity, he always has been, he always will be, and he shows up several times in the Old Testament before he's born as a baby in a manger. It's important to note that even though God knows the outcome of our decisions, he still presents us with the option to choose or reject him. As for us, the outcomes of our decisions are generally a mystery right up to the point that we make them. So, do you know where you have come from and where you are going? Don't go back to Egypt, as it were. Choose to trust the Lord and to follow the Messiah, Jesus. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.